A simple woman is kicked out of a luxury store for not looking the part, but the next day, a millionaire CEO walks in, and what he says leaves everyone speechless. Hello, viewer. Thanks for joining us. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. Jennifer Williams, a 34-year-old art teacher with kind eyes and a penchant for loose-fitting jeans, stood in front of her classroom in the Bronx. Her hair, chestnut brown, twisted into a slightly messy bun, had stray wisps framing her green eyes, which sparkled with gentle encouragement. On the walls behind her hung brightly colored collages and hand-painted sketches made by her students, a vibrant testament to both the chaos and creativity of young minds. She was demonstrating how to blend acrylic paints to achieve softer, pastel-like tones, showing them that the world wasn't just primary colors, but endless hues waiting to be discovered. The battered wooden tables were cluttered with brushes, sponges, and half-used paint tubes. Her students, ranging from 1st to 5th grade, hung on her every word because Jennifer had this knack for making them feel important. She believed that art could be a lifeline for kids often overlooked by the rest of the city. After class, the lively energy of the room faded into a quiet stillness. Jennifer carefully wiped her paint-stained hands on a rag, surveying the watercolor experiments her students had left behind. A small smile tugged at her lips. This work, though simple in technique, had something raw and honest that mirrored the unspoken stories of these kids. She took a mental note to encourage each of them more, especially the shy ones, tomorrow. Her phone buzzed, displaying a text from her best friend, Elaine Chen, 37, who worked as a nurse at the nearby Memorial Hospital. Elaine's message teased Jennifer about the upcoming 6-month anniversary with David Turner, the man who had unexpectedly reshaped Jennifer's life. He was 38, tall, broad-shouldered, with serious blue eyes that revealed a deeply compassionate soul beneath the polished exterior. Although an accomplished CEO of Horizon Technologies, David had managed to stay down to earth in ways that continually surprised Jennifer. Later that afternoon, she slipped out of the school building and caught the subway back to her small Brooklyn apartment. The space was modest, yet filled with warmth. Unfinished canvases leaned against almost every wall, reflecting beams of sunlight that crept through the large windows. A cramped corner served as her personal studio, thick with the scent of oil paint and old turpentine. In that corner stood her latest work in progress, a partially finished canvas she had started months ago but never found the courage to complete. She called it Unspoken Hope, although no one but Elaine knew the title. Placing her worn-out leather satchel on the kitchen counter, Jennifer thought of David. They had met 6 months earlier at Memorial Hospital, where she'd been installing an art exhibit for the pediatric wing. She remembered how he'd stood quietly in the hallway, observing a bright mural she'd created. He introduced himself with a soft-spoken humility that belied his executive status. Their connection was immediate, rooted not in flash or glamour, but in a mutual desire to bring hope to the overlooked corners of the city. Despite his significant wealth, David appreciated Jennifer's unassuming style and understood her belief that appearances shouldn't dictate how people are treated. He adored that she wore old sneakers and paint-streaked jeans, even on dates, laughingly calling it her signature look. Over time, she realized she could share with him not only her art, but also her vulnerabilities. In turn, David confided in her about his father's struggles as a working-class mechanic who taught him to respect people for their actions, not their backgrounds. Now, as she rinsed out brushes in the sink, her phone buzzed again, Elaine checking in once more. Jennifer decided it was time to nail down the details for David's anniversary gift. She'd heard about a special line of silk ties he admired, rumored to be sold only at a prestigious boutique on Fifth Avenue. It was outside her usual comfort zone, but she wanted something meaningful, something that felt symbolic of who David was. A man who balanced corporate responsibilities with genuine compassion. Tomorrow, Jennifer vowed, she would venture onto Fifth Avenue to find that tie. She wasn't sure how she would be received, clad in her typical comfortable attire, but none of that really mattered. The gift was meant to be a token of her gratitude for this beautiful turn in her life. For a brief moment, staring at the painting in progress, she let herself imagine a bright future. After all, if there was one thing Jennifer understood, it was that the most vivid colors often emerged from the most unassuming palettes. On a breezy afternoon, Jennifer arrived on Fifth Avenue, the heart of Manhattan's luxury district. The sidewalks teemed with people weaving in and out of gleaming storefronts, each facade showcasing extravagant displays of items that seemed more akin to museum pieces than ordinary goods. Skyscrapers rose high above, reflecting each other's windows in dazzling patterns, adding to the overwhelming atmosphere of wealth and exclusivity. Jennifer wore her usual faded denim jeans and a simple white sweater beneath a thrifted navy jacket. Though clean and presentable, her outfit stood in stark contrast to the sophisticated attire of the passers-by, people clad in designer coats, polished shoes, and the latest handbags. She noticed the subtle sideways glances thrown her way. Some onlookers seemed to gauge her place among them with a single, dismissive glance. She straightened her back, telling herself she had every right to be here. After all, this trip had a purpose. At the boutique's entrance, a uniformed doorman offered a polite nod, but his neutral expression hinted at doubt. Inside, the Elysian store was a world of discreet opulence. Marble floors reflected strategic overhead lighting, and glass cases displayed accessories that looked like they belonged in an art collection. Her steps echoed in the open space, a reminder that she was a newcomer in this realm of polished luxury. As she wandered among the displays, Jennifer tried to spot the special line of ties David had once praised. She'd overheard him mention a limited edition design, something about the subtle woven pattern that felt both timeless and elegant. Catching a glimpse of a small sign reading "New Arrivals," she moved closer, only to see a tall, impeccably groomed salesman with meticulously combed grey hair presenting a watch to another customer. He was Richard Collins, 45, who carried himself with the authority of someone who'd served Manhattan's elite for decades. Jennifer waited patiently, occasionally admiring the vibrant scarf or sleek leather bag. Nearby, a woman named Samantha Pierce, blonde, 29, and draped in a fur-trimmed coat, commanded attention with the flick of a manicured hand. She seemed utterly at ease, as if shopping here was part of her daily routine. In contrast, Jennifer felt an uneasy knot in her stomach. She tried to catch Richard's eye, but he was intently engaged in conversation with Samantha, touting their latest limited edition collection. Minutes ticked by. Jennifer paced softly around the tie display, where she finally saw the piece she'd come for. A rich, midnight blue silk tie with subtle golden threads woven in delicate geometric shapes. Just the kind of quiet sophistication David would appreciate. She gently touched the fabric, marveling at how the pattern almost shimmered in the light. Her heart fluttered with excitement at the thought of surprising him with something that felt so deeply personal. Wanting to confirm the price and details, Jennifer turned her gaze toward the sales staff. No one approached. She raised a tentative hand but received only perfunctory nods from two employees who immediately shifted their focus back to other clients. A fleeting sense of embarrassment crept in. Did they assume she couldn't afford anything, or was she merely invisible in this environment? Taking a deep breath, Jennifer reminded herself of her own worth, an accomplished art teacher who had collaborated with major hospitals to bring healing through paintings. She might not exude the polished glow of Fifth Avenue regulars, but she had her own quiet confidence. Summoning her courage, she approached Richard with a polite smile. "Excuse me," she began, voice steady. "Could I get some assistance with one of your ties?" He barely glanced her way, offering only a brisk, "Someone will be right with you, ma'am." Then he swiftly turned back to Samantha. Jennifer's cheeks warmed. She forced a smile, stepping back to wait. Determined not to let the brush-off deter her, she hovered near the tie rack. She'd come all this way to find that special gift. One moment of condescension wouldn't break her spirit. Still, her resolve wavered slightly, a whisper of doubt, asking if she truly belonged in a store where even a question could be dismissed so casually. As the minutes stretched on, Jennifer's patience wore thin. Each time she attempted to make eye contact with a salesperson, she was met with avoidance or hurried politeness that evaporated the instant a wealthier-looking customer arrived. The boutique's refined air suddenly felt suffocating, a testament to how it valued appearances above all else. Finally, Jennifer noticed a confident, statuesque woman approach from behind a counter. This had to be Veronica Hartwell, the boutique's manager. At 40 years old, Veronica commanded the room with her strict posture, platinum blonde hair cut in a precise bob, and meticulously applied makeup. Her sharp grey suit hinted at authority, and the cold glint in her pale blue eyes suggested she had mastered the art of swift assessment. Jennifer smiled tentatively, relief flickering in her voice. "Hello, I was hoping—" Veronica's gaze traveled deliberately from Jennifer's scuffed sneakers to her faded jeans and over her simple sweater, pausing at the small smudge of paint on the sleeve. Without a hint of warmth, Veronica folded her arms. "Can I help you?" Trying to maintain composure, Jennifer gestured toward the display. "Yes, I'm interested in that midnight blue tie. I think it's part of your limited edition line." Veronica offered a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "That particular collection is quite exclusive," she said, voice tinged with condescension. "Are you sure you want to look at those?" Taken aback, Jennifer nodded. "I am. It's for someone special. My partner, David." Interrupting, Veronica let out a subdued, dismissive laugh. "We have more affordable items in our seasonal sale section, just over there," she said, pointing to a far corner near the entrance. "Might be more suited to your needs." A flush of heat flooded Jennifer's cheeks. The humiliation was swift and biting. She felt her pride shrink. She opened her mouth to protest, but Veronica's stone-like gaze and the curious stares of a few nearby shoppers pinned her in place. Among them was Marcus Bennett, a 32-year-old corporate attorney who'd been quietly browsing, his brow furrowed at the scene, though he remained an observer, uncertain how to intervene. I specifically want that tie," Jennifer stammered, summoning her courage. "Well, it costs considerably more than what most people expect," Veronica replied, her thinly veiled contempt evident. "Perhaps you'd prefer to come back after checking your budget." Tears threatened to form at the corners of Jennifer's eyes. She glanced at the tie once more, conjuring an image of David's face, a man who would be devastated if he knew she was being treated this way. Summoning her last shred of composure, Jennifer said quietly, "I'm fine, thank you. I'd like to see it." Veronica raised an eyebrow, a glimmer of disbelief crossing her features. "I see. One moment, please." She turned briskly and murmured something to another employee, who eyed Jennifer with what looked like pity. When Veronica returned, she gestured for a security guard stationed near the back. "I think we should handle this discreetly," she said, her tone chillingly polite. "If you're not here to purchase anything within your means, I'm afraid we must ask you to leave." Heart pounding, Jennifer looked around at the silent witnesses. Samantha Pierce watched with a smirk, while Richard Collins stood stone-faced, apparently resigned to the manager's approach. Marcus Bennett hovered nearby, radiating discomfort at the blatant prejudice. Veronica locked eyes with Jennifer, giving her a smile so hollow it felt like an insult. "We have a certain standard here at Elysian," she explained. And from the look of it, she made a vague gesture that encompassed Jennifer's entire outfit. "You might find something more appropriate elsewhere." One of the security staff gently but firmly ushered Jennifer toward the exit. The lump in her throat hardened as she resisted the urge to argue further. On her way out, she caught sight of that beautiful tie, shimmering under the spotlight, a cruel reminder of the gift she'd never gotten to buy. The door closed behind her, and the rush of Fifth Avenue traffic filled her ears. She blinked back tears, humiliated and stunned, struggling to make sense of a world that could judge her so harshly for a mere sweater and paint-splattered sleeve. Jennifer tried to steady her breathing as she strode briskly along the edge of Central Park. The city's roar softened here. Towering trees and winding paths offered a refuge from the relentless energy of Manhattan. Her mind whirled with conflicting emotions, shame, anger, sadness, all converging in a knot that made her chest feel tight. Half an hour later, she found a solitary bench by the edge of the pond. Golden sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting dancing shadows on the water's surface. It was a moment of calm, but her heart still pounded with the echo of Veronica's words. She felt invisible again, just like in high school, when kids mocked her thrift store clothes and paint-streaked fingernails. Back then, her only solace was the sketchbook she carried everywhere, filling its pages with bright worlds far kinder than her reality. She reached for her phone. The screen lit up with missed calls from Elaine and a text from her mother, Catherine Williams, a 65-year-old retired literature teacher who lived upstate. Jennifer hesitated before calling Elaine back. She wasn't ready to recount every humiliating detail of being thrown out of a store simply because she looked unfit to shop there. Instead, she tapped out a quick message to say she was fine, but needed a moment. With a shaky sigh, she tried to recall the teachings of her mentor, Professor Robert Kendrick. She was once his devoted student at an arts program, enthralled by his lessons on transforming personal pain into transcendent art. In her mind's eye, she saw his gentle smile and heard his voice. "True art grows from honest emotion. Don't bury it. Shape it." Rising from the bench, Jennifer decided to walk the rest of the way to her Brooklyn apartment. Normally, she might have hopped on the subway, but tonight she needed time to process. She wove through the bustling streets, ignoring the honking cabs and the glow of neon signs. Step by step, she let the city's rhythm guide her thoughts until her frustration softened into a subtle determination. By the time she arrived home, the sun had dipped below the skyline. She turned on the lamp by her easel and stood in front of a large, blank canvas. Something in her posture shifted, an artist's stance, brimming with the impulse to create. Without changing out of her paint-stained clothes, Jennifer gathered her brushes and acrylics. She selected a bold shade of red first, then some metallic gold, letting instinct guide her. With each brushstroke, she poured out the tangled emotions. The red captured the raw sting of humiliation. The gold represented her unwavering belief that there was something sacred in every human spirit, regardless of outward trappings. Soon, patches of deep blues and purples joined the mix, hues of introspection and resilience. She was painting her tears, her anger, her hope. Exhausted but calmer, she finally set down her brush. The abstract piece she'd created glowed under the lamp's light. Though unfinished, it held a sense of urgency, as if it demanded to exist. She snapped a quick photo on her phone, labeling it as a new concept she might call emergence. It was a reminder that beauty could rise from hurt, that she still controlled how she responded to life's cruelties. She sank onto the old futon by the window. A wave of conflicting emotions returned. She was upset, yet strangely empowered. Perhaps she should just forget about the tie and David's anniversary. Would it even matter if he never knew? But another part of her refused to let the indignity slide. The memory of Veronica's condescending glare flared in her mind, lighting a spark of resolve. Jennifer tapped out a text to Elaine. "Got home safe. Something awful happened. We'll tell you tomorrow." Then she let the phone slip from her hand, feeling the weight of the day pulling her towards sleep. In the darkness of her tiny apartment, the newly painted canvas gleamed, a silent testament to how pain could be transformed into color. Sunlight crept into Jennifer's apartment through gaps in the curtains, illuminating flecks of paint scattered across the floor. She woke with her phone still on her chest, reminders of unread messages blinking on the screen. The memories of yesterday's humiliation at Elysian returned in an uneasy rush. Yet in the calm morning light, her resolve felt more grounded. She reached for a sweater tossed over a chair and made her way into the kitchen to brew coffee. As the aroma filled the air, she took a steadying breath and decided she wouldn't hide this from David forever. But maybe it was best to gather her thoughts first, rather than unleash her anger. For a moment, she stood in front of the canvas she had worked on the previous night. Emergence. The streaks of bold color against darker undertones reminded her of what she was capable of, turning sorrow into statement. Her phone buzzed. It was Elaine Chen, her best friend and confidant. Jennifer answered with a hushed greeting, voice still thick from sleep. "Elaine, I'm okay," she began softly. "I just needed to process everything." "Well, spill," Elaine urged, concern threaded in her voice. "You sounded so upset last night. I was worried." Jennifer explained the ugly scene at Elysian, the dismissive looks, Veronica's cruel remarks, and the final escort out. Elaine listened intently, occasionally interjecting with disbelief or righteous anger. "I can't believe people still do that. Are you telling David?" she finally asked. "I will," Jennifer said, swirling the spoon in her coffee. "But he's got so much on his plate. I don't want him to feel guilty or mad enough to storm into that boutique and cause a scene. This is my problem to handle first." Elaine paused. "Well, you know him better than I do. But remember, you don't have to face this alone." "I appreciate that," Jennifer murmured, touched by her friend's unwavering support. "I'll figure out the right approach." After hanging up, Jennifer scrolled through news headlines, sipping her coffee slowly. Stories about corporate greed and economic disparity only reminded her of how some used wealth as a tool of superiority. But it also fueled her determination not to become what Veronica believed she was, powerless, voiceless. An idea began forming in her mind, a silent plan. If the Elysian staff thought her unworthy, perhaps she could return with David by her side, proving exactly who she was and what she stood for. The thought felt a bit vindictive at first, but as she considered it more, it became less about humiliating them and more about reasserting her own dignity. She wanted to make a statement about how appearances should never dictate respect. She placed her mug on the counter and moved to her desk, where she kept a notebook. She jotted down a few lines. "People shouldn't need a fancy outfit to be treated with decency. I want them to see we are all valuable, no matter what we wear." Her pen stilled. But how to do it? Later that day, she caught up with Elaine in person at Lucy's, a cozy cafe in Greenwich Village, where the exposed brick walls and mismatched tables created a laid-back charm. Over cups of warm chai latte, Jennifer elaborated on her plan, how she would eventually tell David about her ordeal, then let him decide if he wanted to accompany her back to Elysian. "I'm not aiming for revenge," she clarified, "just accountability." Elaine reached out and squeezed Jennifer's hand. "I get it. You want to stand up for yourself and for everyone who's ever been dismissed just because they didn't look the part." Jennifer nodded, feeling a buoyant relief. For a moment, she pictured David's reaction. He was protective, kind and also deeply principled. She suspected he'd be outraged by the boutique's behavior, but she also knew he'd want to address it in a way that would bring about real change, not just public humiliation. Walking back to her apartment, Jennifer felt a quiet fire burning inside. She might not have fancy clothes or a millionaire's last name, but she had something stronger: conviction. And in a city like New York, armed with an unshakable sense of purpose, one determined soul could make a world of difference. Jennifer stood at the entrance of the Riverside, a cozy yet elegant restaurant perched beside the Hudson River. She had arrived a few minutes early, nerves fluttering in her stomach as she surveyed the softly lit interior. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the twilight sky, a gentle wash of lavender and orange that reflected off the water in shimmering ripples. Emma Sullivan, the 53-year-old chef and owner, greeted Jennifer with a warm hug. Emma's robust frame and merry smile always exuded a comforting presence. "David told me you two were celebrating something special," she said, leading Jennifer toward a private corner table set for two. Jennifer felt a pang of anxiety at the mention of the occasion. The plan had been to celebrate their 6-month anniversary, but her mind now buzzed with the memory of being dismissed at Elysian. While waiting for David, Jennifer glanced at the flickering candle in the table's center. Its gentle glow made her think of the painting she'd poured her pain into just the night before. She wondered if the unspoken tension she felt would overshadow this milestone with David. Moments later, a warm hand lightly touched her shoulder. She turned to see him, tall, 38, and broad-shouldered, wearing a crisp navy blazer. His piercing blue eyes immediately filled with concern. "I was worried," David said softly, pulling out a chair for her. "Elaine mentioned you had a rough day. Are you all right?" She took a breath, steadying her voice. "I'm better now that you're here." Her words came out faintly, but sincerity shone in her eyes. Once they were both seated, Emma appeared with 2 glasses of wine. After a brief chat, mostly about Emma's new seasonal menu, she left them to their privacy. David reached for Jennifer's hands across the table. "Tell me everything." Haltingly, Jennifer described her humiliating experience at Elysian, Veronica Hartwell's condescending tone, the security guard ushering her out, and the sting of feeling so utterly disregarded. She swallowed back tears at the memory. "I was just trying to find a special tie for you," she finished, voice trembling. It all felt so demeaning. David's expression shifted from concern to a quiet, intense anger. "I'm so sorry," he said, shaking his head. "No one should be treated that way." He squeezed her hands gently. "Believe me, I've dealt with my share of snobbery too." She blinked, surprised. "You have?" He nodded. "When I was younger, before Horizon Technologies became profitable, I struggled to secure funding. I'd show up to investor meetings in an off-the-rack suit, and half of them looked at me like I was wasting their time." His gaze drifted for a moment, perhaps recalling those early hardships. "My father, James Turner, taught me that a person's worth isn't in their clothes or bank account." He was a mechanic, rough, calloused hands, grease-stained jeans, yet he was the wisest man I ever knew. Jennifer felt her chest tighten, moved by David's words. She could sense the hurt he carried too. "I didn't know you faced that kind of prejudice," she whispered. David exhaled slowly, eyes warming with empathy. "Money changes how people see you, but it shouldn't change who you are. That's why I'm always drawn to the genuineness in you, Jen." They sat in contemplative silence for a moment, letting the gentle clink of glassware and hushed conversation around them fill the background. The Hudson glistened outside, and the sky darkened from lavender to deep navy. Emma brought over delicate plates of salmon and sautéed vegetables. the savory aroma momentarily lifting the heaviness of their conversation. As they began to eat, Jennifer ventured, "I still want you to have the tie, David, but in a way that shows them they can't treat people like this." He nodded, setting down his fork. "I agree. We'll go together. I want to see how they respond when the nobody they dismissed is actually someone who matters." The conviction in his voice was unmistakable. More importantly, they need to see how wrong their assumptions were. "I'm not looking to cause a scene, but I won't pretend it's acceptable." Jennifer placed her hand on his, feeling a comforting unity between them. In that moment, she realized this was more than just confronting a rude store. This was about affirming each other's dignity. She felt a little lighter, hope glowing from within, much like the candle on their table. Tomorrow would bring its challenges, but tonight they'd face them in unison. Morning sunlight streamed through Jennifer's Brooklyn apartment windows as she got ready. Despite her nerves, she chose to dress much the same way she always did: a simple blouse, jeans, and comfortable flats. She did pull her chestnut hair into a slightly neater bun, determined to feel confident in her own style. Why should she pretend to be someone else? David picked her up in a sleek black sedan. He himself wore his usual tailored suit, polished yet understated, which only highlighted his tall frame and sure stride. As he opened the car door for her, he caught the trace of apprehension in her eyes. "You okay?" he asked softly. Jennifer managed a small smile, "Ready as I'll ever be." When they stepped onto Fifth Avenue, the atmosphere was as imposing as ever. Grand storefronts with lavish displays beckoned wealthy patrons, and the elegant crowd hurried by, arms loaded with bags from exclusive brands. Jennifer took a slow breath, reminding herself that she was not here to prove her worth to them. She was here to stand up for herself, pure and simple. Inside Elysian, the buzz of hushed conversation and faint classical music set the stage for another day of luxury commerce. The moment David appeared, heads turned. Several sales associates paused mid-sentence, recognizing him instantly as the CEO of Horizon Technologies. Their postures straightened, polite smiles forming in anticipation of a lucrative sale. Veronica Hartwell, looking every bit as polished in her tailored grey suit, hurried over. Her chilly blue eyes flickered with curiosity and maybe a hint of anxiety at the sight of Jennifer at David's side. "Mr. Turner," she greeted in a bright, almost obsequious tone. "A pleasure to see you. What can we do for you today?" David exchanged a look with Jennifer, who nodded subtly for him to speak first. "We're here because Jennifer was mistreated by your staff yesterday," he said calmly, though his voice carried a distinct edge. "She came to purchase something special, and instead, she was shown the door." A ripple of discomfort spread among the surrounding employees. Samantha Pierce, the blonde socialite who had been there the day before, glanced over from a nearby display of handbags, her face a mixture of shock and curiosity. Richard Collins, the 45-year-old salesman, stood ramrod straight, guilt flickering across his features. Veronica's carefully rehearsed smile faltered. "There must be a misunderstanding," she began, but David cut her off gently, lifting a hand. "No misunderstanding. I'm not here to create a scene, Veronica, but I want you and everyone else to understand exactly who Jennifer Williams is," he said, his tone measured yet firm. "She's a gifted artist whose work graces children's hospitals across the city, bringing hope to patients. She's also my partner, someone I love and respect, and you treated her as if she didn't belong." The hush in the store was palpable. A few customers paused to watch, uncertain whether to step away or linger for what felt like a defining moment. Marcus Bennett, the 32-year-old lawyer who had witnessed Jennifer's humiliation, emerged from behind a display, eyebrows raised in silent support. Jennifer stood quietly, letting David's words resonate. She wasn't looking for revenge. She just wanted to see the shock on their faces, let them realize how cruel prejudice could be. Veronica cleared her throat, trying to salvage her composure. "Mr. Turner, I assure you, we welcome everyone," she insisted, attempting an apologetic grin, but the insincerity was apparent. David exhaled softly. If that were true, Jennifer wouldn't have been dismissed. "My company, Horizon Technologies, has always partnered with businesses that share our values of respect and inclusion. After this, I'm reconsidering any future collaboration with Elysian or recommending it to our affiliates." A stunned silence followed. Some staff exchanged nervous glances, fully aware of the potential fallout from losing a wealthy clientele linked to David Turner. Veronica swallowed, her eyes pleading, We sincerely regret any oversight." Jennifer stepped forward, voice calm yet resolute. "You didn't just lose a sale yesterday. You lost an opportunity to treat a human being with basic kindness." Then, with the grace and confidence she'd feared was lost the day before, Jennifer slipped her arm through David's. They turned and exited the boutique, leaving Veronica and the rest of the store standing amid an awkward hush, exposed, and perhaps just a little more aware of the cost of shallow judgments. Word of the confrontation at Elysian spread rapidly, passed along by high-end shoppers, curious staff, and even a few onlookers who had overheard every word. By evening, a flurry of messages and texts greeted Jennifer's phone. Some came from friends offering congratulations for standing her ground, others expressed shock. A handful of messages from people she barely knew simply read, "Is this story true?" Jennifer stood in her small kitchen, stirring a pot of tomato soup, lost in thought. The adrenaline rush she'd felt earlier in the day had dissipated, leaving her drained. She flipped through her notifications, a mix of supportive and prying. One caught her attention, a polite inquiry from a local newspaper reporter who wanted a comment on the incident. She sighed. The last thing she wanted was to become tabloid fodder. Elaine Chen, her ever-loyal friend, appeared at her door moments later with freshly baked cookies. "I heard a rumor our local art teacher turned into a real-life superhero," Elaine teased, setting the box on the table. "How are you holding up?" "I'm okay," Jennifer replied softly. She recounted the conversation with David at Elysian, the stunned looks on people's faces, the sense of closure that came with speaking her truth. Yet it also felt surreal. She stared at her phone again as more notifications popped up. "They say news travels fast in New York, but wow!" Elaine's eyes widened, scanning a text from a mutual friend who'd read a social media post about Jennifer's confrontation. "Hey, at least most people are on your side." A fleeting embarrassment crossed Jennifer's face. "I don't like all this attention, though. I'm just me, you know. And I feel a bit guilty. Veronica probably got in serious trouble." Elaine shrugged, frustration creeping into her tone. "She brought it on herself. I'm sorry, but people like her need to learn a lesson. You can't judge folks by their clothes." At that moment, Jennifer's phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. She hesitated but answered. On the other end was Marcus Bennett, the attorney who'd witnessed everything at Elysian. His voice was smooth yet earnest. "Miss Williams, I hope you don't mind me calling. I got your number from a mutual acquaintance." "Oh." Jennifer exchanged a curious glance with Elaine. "I just wanted to say I admire how you handled yourself," Marcus explained. "I was there when Veronica kicked you out, and I wanted to let you know if you need any legal backing or statements, I'm here. I have friends who faced similar discrimination, and it doesn't sit well with me." Touched by his sincerity, Jennifer thanked him. She didn't think she needed legal help, but it felt reassuring to know someone was willing to support her if things escalated. Marcus promised to stay in touch and ended the call with a hint that he might have something else to share soon. The next day, at school, Jennifer returned to her routine of teaching art classes. Some colleagues approached her in the break room, curious about the swirling rumors. Her principal, Diana Morgan, offered a discreet nod of support, though she also cautioned that reporters had called the school's office line seeking statements. "I don't plan to go on record," Jennifer replied firmly. "I just want to teach and create. Let the gossip die down." Outside her classroom, she heard a few hushed whispers from other teachers. A part of her wanted to retreat, to hide until the commotion blew over. Yet as soon as she saw the bright faces of her students, she remembered why she did what she did. Art and empathy could transform painful experiences into meaningful ones. That evening, Elaine texted with an update. Rumors circulated that Elysian had suspended Veronica, pending an internal review. Jennifer felt a mix of relief and unease. She had no personal vendetta against the woman, but it was clear that the confrontation had triggered real consequences. Sipping tea by her studio window, Jennifer found herself painting again, this time capturing the swirl of emotions that followed her newfound visibility. The canvas seemed to absorb her anxiety, fear, and cautious optimism all at once. In the stillness of that moment, she realized the echoes of that confrontation had only just begun reverberating through her life, and in ways she couldn't yet foresee, through the city's social fabric as well. Jennifer spent the next few afternoons in her studio, channeling her recent experiences into new art pieces she loosely labeled Beyond the Glimpse. In these canvases, she played with layers of translucent paint over silhouettes, suggesting that outward appearances always held deeper, hidden dimensions. She felt both liberated and restless, a swirl of artistic inspiration mixed with the lingering buzz of public curiosity. In between brushstrokes, she found time to read through emails. Among them was one from Margaret Whitman, the 62-year-old owner of the prestigious Whitman Gallery. Jennifer's eyes widened. She'd heard of Margaret's gallery. It was known for showcasing emerging artists with strong social messages. Margaret's message was brief but direct. She'd taken an interest in Jennifer's hospital works and was keen to see more of her portfolio. Heart-pounding, Jennifer reread the email. Could her sudden spotlight from the Elysian incident have prompted this interest? Possibly. But it was also true that her art in the pediatric wards had garnered quiet admiration for months. Regardless, the gallery invite felt like a glimmer of possibility. She replied with a polite acceptance, her nerves tingling at the thought of stepping onto that bigger stage. That same week, she noticed one of her 8th grade students, Tyler Rodriguez, staying behind after class. He was a slight boy, 13, with second-hand clothes that didn't quite fit and serious brown eyes. He lingered near the paint station, fiddling with brushes. Jennifer approached him gently. "Hey, Tyler, need something?" He shrugged, his voice barely audible. I wondered if I could show you this." He produced a battered sketchbook from his backpack. Inside were drawings that told stark stories, portraits of kids mocking him for his oversized clothes, and half-hidden pages hinting at his own fear of not fitting in. Jennifer's heart ached. "These are powerful," she whispered, flipping through the pages. "You have real talent and a lot to say." Tyler's eyes glistened, and he hesitated. I heard something happened to you. My cousin told me you stood up to some fancy store that treated you bad because of how you dress." Jennifer gave a soft laugh. "Yeah, I guess so." His face lit up with a glimmer of hope. "That's really cool. I mean, people think it's your fault if you don't have the right clothes, like you deserve to be treated poorly." He paused, swallowing hard. "But it's not right." Her chest tightened. She realized her experience had already resonated with students who battled superficial judgments every day. She gave Tyler a smile. "It's definitely not right, and your art is a voice. It can shout louder than fancy shoes or expensive suits ever could." He nodded, relief flooding his features. She promised to help him refine his drawings and even mentioned a small contest the school was running. Tyler left with a more confident stride, and Jennifer felt renewed purpose. Art wasn't just for galleries, it was for kids like Tyler who needed to see themselves as more than the labels society slapped on them. Later that evening, David dropped by her apartment with takeout. Over boxes of steamed dumplings, he asked about her day, and she recounted the story of Tyler. A thoughtful expression crossed David's face. "That's what your art does," he said softly. "It empowers people to see who they can be beyond the surface." Jennifer felt a warmth in her chest. "I hope so. I really do." Before leaving, David mentioned how some corporate friends had inquired about her artwork. Apparently, the Elysian incident had sparked curiosity in business circles. "I told them you're not doing this for publicity, but it's a good chance to show your message," he said, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. That night, as Jennifer returned to her studio, she couldn't shake the sense that everything was unfolding at once, like a door had cracked open. The trials at Elysian had exposed both the cruelty of shallow judgments and the surprising solidarity of strangers. Guided by a stronger conviction, she set to work on another canvas. With every brushstroke, she felt as though she was inviting people to look deeper, to see past the immediate image and into the empathy that lay beneath. A crisp Saturday morning found Jennifer standing at the front steps of the Whitman Gallery, nerves thrumming in her chest. The exterior was understated, clean lines of steel and glass, but inside, she knew it housed some of the most influential modern art exhibits in the city. She clutched her portfolio, heart pounding, wondering if the sudden interest in her work was just fleeting hype. A poised woman of petite stature greeted her in the lobby. "You must be Jennifer Williams," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Sophia Chen, Associate Curator here at Whitman. Margaret's looking forward to meeting you." Jennifer recognized a kindred spirit in Sophia. Something about her steady gaze and thoughtful manner put Jennifer at ease. As they walked through the gallery's airy rooms, Jennifer glimpsed vibrant sculptures and paintings from renowned artists. She felt a pang of intimidation, but steadied herself, recalling that her own art had a unique voice to offer. Margaret Whitman herself was a commanding presence, even at 62. She wore her white hair cut short, paired with a minimalist black ensemble. Her sharp eyes scanned Jennifer before softening into a smile. "I've heard about your work in the hospitals. Healing art, they call it. I find that concept fascinating." Jennifer's pulse quickened. "I just try to create pieces that bring hope," she replied simply. "Color and shape can shift how people feel, even if it's just for a moment." Margaret nodded thoughtfully, then directed Jennifer to show her portfolio. Flipping through images of murals, paintings, and smaller sketches, she paused at a particular piece, one that depicted a swirling mass of reds and golds rising from a darker backdrop. "This is raw, powerful," Margaret remarked. "May I ask what inspired it?" Jennifer exhaled. "A personal experience of being judged by my appearance," she admitted softly. "But it also reflects the resilience that can grow from pain." Margaret exchanged a knowing glance with Sophia. "We're planning an exhibit focusing on social commentary and the hidden stories behind everyday appearances. Your work could fit beautifully." A tremor of excitement raced through Jennifer. She tried not to let it overwhelm her. "I'd be honored," she managed. Their discussion was interrupted by a knock at the open door. Marcus Bennett stepped inside, smiling in greeting. Jennifer blinked, surprised. She hadn't expected to see him here. "I hope I'm not interrupting," he said, adjusting his stylish glasses. "Margaret, you asked me to swing by today." "I did," Margaret confirmed, gesturing him inside. "Marcus is not just a lawyer. He's an informal advisor for the gallery, helping us navigate the complexities of corporate collaborations." Marcus turned to Jennifer. "I've been meaning to share something with you. I recorded a brief video on my phone that day at Elysian, where Veronica basically insulted you. I never wanted to post it publicly without your consent, but I thought you might want it for some reason, personal or artistic." Jennifer's cheeks warmed. "I'm grateful. I don't want to sensationalize anything, but seeing it might help me process more deeply." Margaret's brow lifted. "This video might be a powerful statement in the exhibit, if framed correctly. Not to shame Elysian, but to spark discussion around superficial judgments." Sophia, standing beside Margaret, nodded. "We could display it as a multimedia piece alongside your art, Jennifer, focusing on the themes of perception and worth." Jennifer's mind spun. It was one thing to stand up for herself in a store, but to integrate that moment into her art. Still, the idea resonated. "I'll think about it," she said. After the meeting, Marcus offered to treat Jennifer to a coffee at a nearby cafe. They found a bohemian-style corner spot, walls adorned with local art, and the aroma of roasted beans thick in the air. Between sips, Marcus confided in her about times he had been discounted by clients who assumed he wasn't senior enough because of his age or race. "Prejudice isn't always about money," he concluded. "It's about power and how people wield it." They parted ways with a shared sense of purpose. As Jennifer headed home, she felt the momentum of unexpected allies building around her. Margaret, Sophia, Marcus, and even David supporting her from another angle. Where once she felt alone in her ordeal, she now sensed the beginnings of a community forging a path toward deeper empathy and change. A week later, Jennifer was in her studio putting the finishing touches on a new painting when a knock on the door interrupted her. She looked up to see David, his usually calm face taut with concern. "I got home to a letter addressed to you," he said, stepping inside carefully to avoid the jars of paint on the floor. "It's from a law firm representing Elysian." Jennifer's stomach knotted. She wiped her hands on a rag, taking the envelope with trembling fingers. Opening it, she discovered a formal letter warning her against any defamatory statements that could harm the boutique's reputation. The message was clear: cease discussing the incident publicly or face potential legal consequences. A cold chill ran down her spine. She reread the paragraphs, her mind brimming with questions. "They're basically threatening a lawsuit if I talk about what happened," she said quietly. "But everything that's been said is true." David pressed a hand gently to her shoulder, his voice steady. "They must be panicking about the negative attention. Don't let them bully you. We can consult Marcus or another attorney." She nodded, heart pounding. After David left for an important meeting, she leaned against the wall, feeling a wave of anxiety. In truth, she didn't want a legal battle overshadowing her life or her art. Yet the letter made her realize just how determined Elysian was to silence her perspective. The next day at the Whitman Gallery, Jennifer met with Margaret and Sophia. She laid the letter on a table in Margaret's office, ornate, with walls adorned by edgy modern pieces. Margaret scanned the document, scowling. "Typical intimidation tactic," she muttered. "They want to muzzle you because they fear your story will damage their brand." Sophia glanced sympathetically at Jennifer. "Does this change your willingness to include any reference to Elysian in your upcoming exhibit? We don't want you to risk legal trouble." Jennifer rubbed her temples. "I don't want the focus to be some vendetta against Elysian. The art is about seeing beyond superficial judgments, not about a single store's reputation." Before they could discuss further, Margaret's assistant peeked in. "Veronica Hartwell is in the lobby," she said, sounding surprised. "She's asking to speak with Miss Williams." A jolt of shock rippled through Jennifer. She hadn't anticipated seeing Veronica again, let alone here. Margaret exchanged a cautious look with Sophia. "Send her in." Moments later, Veronica entered, looking distinctly different from her polished, imposing self. Her blonde bob was less meticulously styled, and her designer outfit had been replaced by a simpler blouse and slacks. Dark circles under her eyes hinted at stress and sleepless nights. "I was fired," she began bluntly, glancing at Jennifer with something resembling remorse. "Not suspended, terminated. Gregory Palmer made it clear that I was responsible for the store's negative press." Jennifer stared, heart conflicted. She felt a pang of sympathy, despite the memory of Veronica's cruelty. "I'm sorry you lost your job, but you know how this started," Veronica sighed, lowering her gaze. "I do, and I've had time to reflect. Look, I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know—" She cleared her throat. "I was wrong, completely. The way I treated you, it wasn't just about your clothes. I was under immense pressure from management to cater exclusively to high-spending clientele. That doesn't excuse my behavior. I let my own fears overshadow basic decency." Sophia and Margaret watched silently, letting the moment unfold. Veronica continued, "I heard rumors of your art exhibit that highlights superficial judgments. I came to ask if you'd ever consider including my story. Not to paint me as a victim, but as someone who learned a lesson too late." Her expression was earnest, almost pleading. Jennifer glanced between Margaret and Sophia, then back at Veronica. She recalled her own vow to focus on transformation, not revenge. Elysian's legal threat still loomed, but Veronica stood before her, a stark reminder that real people were tangled in these webs of prejudice. "I need time to think," Jennifer replied finally, her voice softer than she expected. Veronica nodded, shoulders sagging in relief that at least she wasn't rejected outright. Once she left, Margaret placed a supportive hand on Jennifer's arm. "Every act of truth has a price. You have to decide how much you're willing to pay." Jennifer breathed in, the weight of the legal letter and Veronica's confession colliding in her thoughts. Even as uncertainty pressed in on her, she felt an undercurrent of resolve. The message of her art, the call to see beyond surfaces, mattered now more than ever. The hum of traffic outside Jennifer's temporary studio was constant, a dull roar that seemed to underscore the urgency she felt. Margaret Whitman had arranged for her to use this larger workspace in an arts complex near Midtown. Boxes of canvases, paint tubes, and charcoal pencils cluttered the room. Jennifer, wearing an old smock stained with every color imaginable, paced before a massive blank canvas propped against the wall. She had been staring at it for what felt like hours, ideas churning but refusing to settle. The goal was clear: create a cohesive, powerful set of pieces for the upcoming Beyond Appearances exhibit. But every time she lifted her brush, a flicker of hesitation stopped her. Despite the outpouring of support and the controversy surrounding her confrontation at Elysian, she found herself oddly paralyzed by the importance of this moment. Her phone buzzed, snapping her from her reverie. It was Elaine Chen, urging her to take breaks, eat properly, and not overthink. Jennifer offered a quick, appreciative reply, then returned to the canvas. She closed her eyes, recalling Professor Robert Kendrick's words, "When in doubt, begin anywhere." Let your heart guide the brush. Gently, she pressed a stroke of deep blue across the stark whiteness. Immediately, tension in her shoulders eased. Another stroke followed, emerald green. As the colors intersected, an idea sparked. She could paint the emotional transitions people experience when they are truly seen for who they are. In smooth, deliberate motions, she laid down layers of swirling color, allowing each shade to represent a different layer of identity, some bright with hope, others shadowy with sorrow. Halfway through, she paused to check the time. In 2 hours, she was due at the school for an art club session she had volunteered to run. A new sense of responsibility weighed on her, now that the students looked to her as an example of standing up against superficial judgments. She didn't want to let them down or let the exhibit overshadow her commitment to them. Arriving at the school later, she found Tyler Rodriguez waiting in the hallway, clutching his sketchbook, his eyes lit up when he saw her. "Miss Williams, I tried that layering technique you mentioned," he said excitedly. She smiled, flipping through his pages, which depicted fragile silhouettes overlapping bold shapes, a visual story of feeling invisible yet yearning to be noticed. "These are fantastic," Jennifer praised, genuinely moved by his raw expression. "Art can be honest, right? It's one place you don't have to pretend." Tyler nodded, gaze dropping. "I used to hide my drawings because I was scared people would laugh. But after hearing what happened to you, I guess it made me braver." His words echoed in Jennifer's mind as she led the club session, guiding students through projects on self-portraiture. While they worked, she realized something crucial. The blank canvas in her studio wasn't really blank at all. It was loaded with the hopes, fears, and transformations of people like Tyler, Veronica, and even herself. She had to allow their stories room to breathe on that canvas, to refuse the tidy, surface-level narratives society often demanded. That evening, she returned to the Midtown studio, rummaging through a stack of reference photos and notes. She pulled out the letter from Elysian's lawyers, feeling a twinge of fear. Laying it aside, she taped photographs of her hospital murals on the wall, children smiling through adversity, bright swirls of color symbolizing resilience. Next to them, she pinned sketches from her students who depicted their own dreams and insecurities. In the far corner, she propped up a mirror, remembering how appearances had become such a weapon in her life recently. She studied her reflection, hair askew from the day's hustle, a small streak of paint on her cheek. This was who she was, an artist who believed in hope, in second chances, in the beauty of imperfection. With renewed determination, she returned to the large canvas she'd started that morning. The swirl of colors needed more depth, and she wasn't afraid to darken certain edges now. Each brushstroke captured both the pain of prejudice and the solace of empathy. By the time she set her brush down for the night, she felt a surge of energy. The canvas was no longer empty. It was alive with the authenticity she'd fought for, and it would set the tone for everything else to come. Jennifer awoke to the sound of rain tapping against her bedroom window. The grey skies mirrored the introspective mood that had settled over her. After a quick breakfast, she grabbed her umbrella and rushed to the train that would take her to a small conference organized by the local Arts Education Board. She'd been asked to speak about the impact of art on marginalized communities, a topic dear to her heart. The event took place in a modest community center, no polished marble floors or gilded fixtures here. Folding chairs were arranged in a circle, and a simple projector stood at the ready. Jennifer felt a flutter of nerves as she approached the group of educators, activists, and a few community leaders. She recognized Marcus Bennett's face among them, offering an encouraging nod. Her presentation began smoothly, focusing on her hospital murals and the school programs. But mid-speech, she felt a sudden wave of self-consciousness. She was explaining how people often judge others without understanding their inner worlds. Yet was she entirely free of judgment herself? When the talk ended, the group applauded politely. A handful of participants asked thoughtful questions, commending her willingness to tackle the superficial judgments she had personally faced. Marcus gave her a discreet thumbs up from across the room. Still, a quiet unease gnawed at her. Hadn't she secretly harbored her own judgments about, say, people like Samantha Pierce or even wealthy clients who flitted through Elysian without a second thought? During the coffee break, Jennifer found herself speaking with an older man named Gerald Parker, 72, whose appearance was austere, pinstripe suit, a thin tie, and a silver cane that hinted at mobility issues. He complimented her on her speech, then shared a bit of his background. He was a discreet patron of the arts who had faced prejudice in earlier decades because of his sexuality. "I kept much of my personal life hidden," he admitted quietly. "It's easier to be dismissed when people think you don't fit their mold." Jennifer swallowed, recalling how she'd once seen men in suits like his and assumed they were only interested in profit, not people. She offered an apologetic smile. "I realize I've been guilty of my own assumptions at times," she confessed. "In the midst of fighting for what's right, I sometimes forget that each person has their own struggles, hidden or not." Gerald nodded, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Our shared humanity can get buried under appearances. A little grace, for ourselves and for others, goes a long way." Later, Elaine invited Jennifer to her small apartment in Queens for dinner. Over takeout Thai food, Elaine heard her friend's confession. "I keep telling people to look past appearances, but then I catch myself labeling them. Like Veronica, initially, I wrote her off as just a shallow manager. And even some of the wealthier donors who approach me, I assume they only care about status. It's hypocritical." Elaine chewed thoughtfully on a bite of pad thai. "Well, that's the tricky part. We all have biases, Jen. The difference is you're acknowledging them. You're not letting them control you. Maybe that's the next step in your art, showing that we're all both victims and perpetrators of judgment sometimes." That struck a chord. Jennifer realized that her exhibit shouldn't just confront those who had judged her. It needed to challenge everyone, including herself. The next morning, she revisited her half-finished piece at the studio. On a whim, she pressed a hand to the swirl of paint, leaving a faint imprint. Then, using a light gray, she painted silhouettes of multiple figures, blending them so they overlapped in a way that made it impossible to tell where one ended and the next began. The resulting effect was disorienting yet captivating, mirrors within mirrors, reflecting how each of us harbors judgments. Pausing, she texted Marcus. "Need to talk about exhibit updates." "Are you free?" he replied almost instantly, agreeing to meet later in the week. Jennifer set down her phone, a sense of relief mingling with the weight of self-reflection. She realized that confronting one's own biases was perhaps the hardest mirror to face. Still, she felt a growing resolve. The journey of understanding always started with an honest look inward. Late afternoon sunlight filtered through the high windows of the Whitman Gallery conference room, highlighting the tension on Jennifer's face. She sat across from Margaret Whitman, Sophia Chen, and a group of investors who were somewhat uneasy about the direction of Beyond Appearances. A few had already suggested that certain artworks, especially those referencing the Elysian incident, might be too controversial and could alienate potential sponsors. "So you're telling me," Margaret began coolly, crossing her arms, "that you want to dilute the message of this exhibit to keep it more palatable for high-end donors. That's not why this gallery exists." A tall man in a tailored suit named Wallace Tatum, representing a wealthy philanthropic circle, cleared his throat. "No one's suggesting we censor Miss Williams. But we do have to be mindful of the gallery's broader reputation and the comfort of our patrons." Jennifer felt her chest tighten. She understood the financial realities behind art showcases, but the suggestion to scale back felt like a compromise of her core values. She flicked a glance at Sophia, whose gentle eyes conveyed support. Standing, Jennifer began, "The exhibit isn't about attacking anyone personally. It's about shining a light on how appearances often overshadow deeper truths. This message might unsettle some people, especially those who profit from superficial judgments, but that's precisely the point. Art should challenge us. Silence hung thick in the room. Margaret nodded firmly, while Wallace exchanged nervous glances with another investor. It was clear some alliances were on shaky ground. After the meeting, Margaret walked Jennifer to the gallery's atrium. "Don't lose heart," she said. "We've fended off conservative donors before, but be prepared for more resistance. They might threaten to pull funding or pressure us to move the exhibit to a less prominent space." Jennifer swallowed. "I won't back down from what needs to be said," she replied quietly. "I'd rather show fewer pieces than compromise on the core message." That evening, she met David at his upscale Manhattan apartment, an open floor plan with minimalist furniture and breathtaking city views. The tension she carried was evident as she paced around his polished living room. David noticed immediately. "Tough day." She recounted the investors' meeting. "They basically want me to water down everything. I don't want to be ungrateful, but this exhibit can't just be pleasant decor for fancy parties." David listened intently, then reached for her hand. "I respect that. My only worry is how much stress this puts on you, especially after what happened with Elysian's legal threats. You're juggling so much." Jennifer appreciated his concern, yet stubborn determination flared. "If I cave, what was the point of all this? I'd be reinforcing the very thing I've been fighting against." A text pinged on David's phone. He read it, brow furrowing. "We just lost a contract with a high-profile partner," he admitted. "I can't be sure it's connected, but they mentioned some reservations about the negative publicity swirling around the Elysian incident." A pang of guilt jabbed Jennifer's heart. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I never wanted my personal battle to affect Horizon Technologies." David pulled her into a gentle embrace. "Don't apologize. Doing the right thing has consequences. I'll handle this from my end. Just promise me you won't shoulder all of this alone." The next day, Jennifer wrestled with her conscience. When a call came in from Veronica Hartwell, she nearly ignored it, but decided to pick up. Veronica's voice was subdued. "I wanted you to know that Gregory Palmer is well connected in the art scene too. He's been talking to potential sponsors, trying to undermine your exhibit. I think he blames me for this mess, and by extension, you." A cold knot formed in Jennifer's stomach. She thanked Veronica for the warning, then collapsed onto her paint-stained stool, mind racing. How far would these powerful figures go to maintain their polished images? She stared at the half-finished sketches for the exhibit. They felt more critical than ever, living proof of her stand against superficiality. Pressing her fingers into the charcoal, she traced the outlines of a figure that wore a mask splitting into two faces, one pristine, one fractured. Perhaps this piece would become a focal point of the show. As her own doubts thrummed beneath the surface, she recognized the gravity of her choice: yield to external pressures or push forward, even if it meant losing financial support. The tension in the air was thick, but a quiet voice inside reminded her, genuine art, like genuine humanity, was never meant to be confined by fear. Late one afternoon, Jennifer found herself in the lobby of Memorial Hospital, standing in front of the mural that first connected her to David. The swirl of cool blues and warm yellows, depicting a sunrise over a cityscape, offered a sense of calm to the patients who passed by. She ran her fingertips over the painted surface, recalling how determined she had been to bring comfort through art. Now she needed that comfort herself. She was there to meet Dr. Sarah Lynn, a 44-year-old oncologist with a serene demeanor that belied her demanding job. Dr. Lynn had invited Jennifer for a quick tour of the pediatric wing, where more of Jennifer's artwork was displayed. Children's drawings, sunflowers, family portraits, crayon rainbows lined the corridor walls, adding splashes of color to an otherwise sterile environment. Art can transform fear into hope, Dr. Lin murmured as they strolled. I see it every day. She then paused, turning to face Jennifer. I heard about the challenges with your exhibit. It seems like a similar fight, trying to turn prejudice into understanding. Jennifer nodded, her eyes drifting to a tiny patient in a wheelchair, giggling as she rolled by with a stuffed giraffe in her lap. I wish we could show these critics what truly matters. All their posturing and judgments melt away when faced with real human vulnerability. Dr. Lin's pager beeped, signaling her back to duty. She offered Jennifer a brief but heartfelt smile. Keep doing what you do. It reaches more people than you realize. Later, Jennifer headed to her own studio, a wave of clarity washing over her. The frustration from corporate pressures eased, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose. She recalled Tyler's sketches, Veronica's remorse, and even the letter from Elysian's lawyers. All of these experiences served as parts of a larger tapestry. She resolved to weave them into her art, not out of bitterness, but out of the conviction that healing and empathy could prevail. That night, David stopped by after work to check on her progress. He found Jennifer kneeling on the floor, piecing together fragments of glass and broken pottery into a mosaic shape on a large wooden board. The shards glimmered under the overhead light. She looked up, eyes reflecting an intense focus. This is the centerpiece for the exhibit, she explained, gesturing to the mosaic forming a human silhouette. I'm calling it reconciliation. Each fragment represents pain, discrimination, or regret. But together, they form something whole and beautiful. David crouched beside her. That's powerful. So every piece of broken glass has its own story. Jennifer nodded, carefully fitting a fragment of smoky grey glass next to a sliver of translucent blue. It's my way of showing that our wounds, and even our worst mistakes, can be part of something transformative if we let them be. He gently placed a hand on the mosaic's edge. I wish you could see how proud I am of you. His words brought a lump to her throat. She managed a grateful smile. Thank you, but I can't lie. I'm scared. The threats from Elysian Circle, the pushback from donors. Sometimes I wonder if I'm being naive, thinking art can overcome all this. David pulled her into a gentle embrace. Naive or not, it's making a difference. The next day, with renewed energy, Jennifer called Tyler's mom to invite him to visit her studio. She had an idea to feature a corner of the exhibit dedicated to youth art, showing how kids process judgments from adults. Tyler arrived, wide-eyed at the organized chaos of her studio, easels and paints scattered in every corner. She explained her concept. I want to include your drawings, Tyler, not just to highlight your talent, but to show how young people view these issues. He beamed, flipping open his sketchbook. I'm in. Later, alone again, Jennifer stood back from the mosaic. Light from the overhead lamp caught each shard, reflecting different shades of color across the walls. The piece was nearly done, yet she felt something was missing. Suddenly, she realized she needed to incorporate Veronica's story too. A piece that symbolized redemption, perhaps a small, gold-tinted shard near the mosaic's heart, representing second chances. Picking up the gold fragment, Jennifer pressed it gently into the mosaic. The shape took on new meaning, an undeniable mix of brokenness and beauty. In that moment, she understood that this was the heart of her truth. Our imperfections, when acknowledged, could unite us in deeper empathy. And the exhibit would stand as a testament that healing often begins where judgment ends. In the days leading up to the exhibit, Jennifer sensed a growing network of quiet supporters, people she hadn't expected to stand by her side. Margaret had told her donations trickled in from individuals who appreciated the bold message of beyond appearances, balancing out the loss from certain bigger donors who had withdrawn. It was as if, behind the scenes, A multitude of small voices were joining to uplift the project. One afternoon, Jennifer noticed an email from Elizabeth Chen, the 42-year-old editor-in-chief of Art Forum, a respected publication in New York's art world. With an unmistakable tone of professional warmth, Elizabeth wrote that she was planning a feature article on exhibits challenging social norms, and Jennifer's name had come up repeatedly. Would she be open to an interview? Jennifer's heart fluttered. Art Forum carried significant influence, capable of putting emerging artists on the cultural map. She quickly replied in the affirmative, feeling both thrilled and a bit uneasy about the potential spotlight. Later that week, she met Marcus Bennett at a cozy, family-owned cafe in the Upper West Side. The aroma of fresh pastries and roasted coffee beans provided a comforting backdrop to their conversation. Marcus sipped his espresso before sharing some news. A few attorneys I work with want to form a pro bono network, defending artists and individuals who face harassment or legal intimidation for speaking out. Jennifer's eyes widened. That's incredible. You all are building a protective net for cases like Elysian's threats? Marcus nodded. Exactly. Your story lit a spark, Jen. People see how easily big corporations can silence voices through legal bullying. We want to fight that. A wave of gratitude washed over her. In a world that sometimes felt weighted down by cynicism, the idea of professionals uniting to protect creative expression was a ray of hope. Thank you, she said softly, taking a moment to let that sink in. Shortly afterward, as Jennifer returned to her studio, her phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. She almost let it go to voicemail but picked up at the last second. On the other end was a slight tremor in the voice. Miss Williams, this is Olivia Reed, one of the newer sales associates at Elysian. You don't know me, but I was there when everything happened. I'm so sorry I didn't speak up. Jennifer's hand tightened around the phone, her pulse quickening. Olivia, you don't owe me an apology. You were just doing your job. I wish I'd stepped in, Olivia continued. Anyway, I just wanted you to know there were employees who thought what Veronica did was wrong. Some of us tried to raise concerns, but we were ignored. When we heard you'd been threatened legally, I felt sick. We can't say anything openly, but we support you. If you need any internal documents or proof of how things were handled that day, let me know. Jennifer found herself speechless, stunned by the quiet courage it took for Olivia to call. She thanked the associate, carefully saving her number in case she ever needed it. Ending the call, Jennifer stood in the center of her studio, surrounded by canvases nearly ready for the exhibit, and felt a deep sense of awe. Allies were emerging from unexpected places, like seeds germinating in the darkness, pushing through obstacles to reach the light. That evening, she convened a small meeting at the studio with Marcus, Elaine, and David to discuss the new developments. David brought a box of pastries, which they devoured over lively conversation. Elaine marveled at the collective shift. Who would have thought so many people were just waiting for someone to speak out? She mused. Marcus agreed. I think it shows that empathy and fairness resonate, even if they start as whispers. One voice can become many. Jennifer couldn't help but think back to the day she was kicked out of Elysian, how small she had felt. Now, with each unexpected ally, she felt a renewed capacity for hope. Despite the formidable powers trying to silence her, she sensed a rising tide of humanity, encouraging her to keep pressing forward. She walked them out, standing under the glow of the streetlights as they said their goodbyes. Returning to her studio, she gazed upon the mosaic and the canvases. The final touches beckoned. In their fragile, reflective surfaces, she saw not just her own journey, but the glimmer of countless others who stood beside her, ready to push the conversation beyond appearances and toward a deeper compassion. The grand opening of Beyond Appearances had finally arrived, and the Whitman Gallery was ablaze with anticipation. Weeks of preparation led up to this moment, and Jennifer Williams felt every ounce of it. Standing near the gallery's entrance, she watched as streams of attendees, collectors as critics, art enthusiasts, and curious passers-by filed in. Her heart hammered in her chest, a mix of excitement and dread swirling through her mind. The spacious hall had been transformed under Margaret Whitman's guidance. Soft, carefully placed lighting emphasized each artwork's textures and colors. In the center of the main room, Jennifer's mosaic piece, Reconciliation, captured immediate attention. Visitors gravitated to it, drawn by the glimmer of broken shards painstakingly arranged into the shape of a human silhouette. Spotlights danced across the gold fragments embedded near its heart. David Turner, dressed in a simple yet elegant navy suit, arrived at Jennifer's side. He slid an arm around her waist, sensing her nerves. "Look around," he whispered. "They're here for your art, Jen." She nodded, eyes scanning the room. She spotted Elaine Chen, beaming as she chatted with a group of fellow nurses. Marcus Bennett hovered near one wall display, fielding questions from a small circle of people curious about his pro bono initiative. Sophia Chen, the associate curator, seemed to float around the gallery, ensuring each guest found something engaging to discuss. A hush fell as Margaret stepped onto a small platform at one end of the room to address the crowd. "Thank you all for attending tonight's opening of Beyond Appearances. Our featured artist, Jennifer Williams, has poured her heart and soul into these pieces. Each artwork explores how surface judgments can mask deeper truths, and how we can choose to see beyond them." The audience parted, revealing Jennifer, who took a breath and moved toward the platform. Her chest felt tight. Public speaking wasn't her favorite, but as she faced the attentive crowd, her eyes were drawn to a single figure entering the gallery, Gregory Palmer, the owner of Elysian. He stood near the back, shoulders stiff, expression guarded. The sight of him rattled her momentarily, but she pressed on. "Art, for me, is about connection," she began, voice steadying. "When we judge based on appearances, we lose that chance to truly see one another. These works represent my own journey of confronting prejudice, both external and internal." Her gaze drifted across the mosaic, the layered paintings, and the multimedia pieces that included snippets of personal stories. "I hope this exhibit sparks something in each of you, some reflection, or maybe a conversation you've been avoiding." Polite applause rose, though the room still felt charged, like an electric current coursed beneath every interaction. As Jennifer stepped down, she spotted a fleeting look of reluctance on Gregory Palmer's face. He lingered at the edge of the crowd, flanked by two well-dressed individuals. One was a woman Jennifer recognized from prior investor meetings, wearing a carefully neutral expression. Moments later, a small commotion broke out near the mosaic. Veronica Hartwell, looking subdued yet resolute in a simple black dress, had arrived. Her once frosty demeanor appeared softened, her posture less rigid. Some guests recognized her, unsure how to react. They shifted aside to let her approach. Jennifer watched as Veronica stood before Reconciliation, eyes reflecting the mosaic's fractured light. No words were spoken, but the raw emotion on her face spoke volumes. David gave Jennifer's hand a supportive squeeze. "This is your night," he murmured. "Don't let anyone steal that." Jennifer nodded, inhaling deeply. Tonight was indeed a culmination of everything: her creative vision, her stance against bias, her willingness to reach for understanding over vengeance. But she could feel the storm beneath the surface. Gregory's silent scrutiny, Veronica's emotional reckoning, the tension among potential donors. This was the night when truths would be revealed, for better or worse. As she moved through the crowd, the air buzzed with excited voices discussing the art. Strangers approached her with compliments and questions. She answered politely, ever aware of Gregory and Veronica's presence looming in the periphery. The stage was set for confrontation, redemption, or perhaps a mix of both. All Jennifer could do was stand firm in her truth and trust that the art and the humanity within it would speak louder than any threat. Amid the soft hum of clinking champagne flutes and hushed admiration for the artwork, a sudden tension rippled through the gallery. Gregory Palmer, with meticulously combed grey hair and a tailored suit, stepped forward to address Jennifer. Those nearby fell silent, watching the scene unfold. "This exhibit," Gregory began, his voice measured, "it's created quite the stir in certain circles." His gaze swept the pieces, pausing on a painting that depicted overlapping silhouettes of people from different walks of life. "I recognize your talent, Mrs. Williams. Still, I question the need to air private grievances so publicly." Jennifer felt David shift beside her, but she gently laid a hand on his arm, indicating she could handle this. "I'm not naming anyone or pointing fingers, Mr. Palmer. The work speaks to universal experiences, how judgments rooted in appearance can harm us all." His jaw tightened. "Some judgments are based on practicality, like whether someone can afford a product or not." A murmur of discomfort spread among the surrounding guests. Margaret Whitman approached, prepared to intervene if things escalated. But Jennifer simply drew a steadying breath. "What happened at Elysian wasn't practical," she said softly. "It was humiliating and unfair. And that's not something I'll hide just because it makes others uneasy." From the opposite side of the mosaic, Veronica Hartwell stepped forward. She cleared her throat, summoning courage. "I was the store manager who turned her away," she confessed to the circle of onlookers. "I was focused on meeting quotas, catering to our highest-spending clients. I lost sight of what was right." Gregory shot her a sharp glare. "Veronica, if you're seeking sympathy—" She cut him off, surprising everyone with a firm, quiet resolve. "I'm not seeking sympathy. I'm owning my mistake. I was fired, Mr. Palmer, and I understand why." She turned her attention to Jennifer. "I came here tonight to see how you used a horrible moment and turned it into something meaningful. It's humbling." A hush fell. Visitors strained to catch every word, and cameras from a couple of local reporters flashed. Jennifer noted the vulnerability in Veronica's eyes, a raw honesty that she hadn't witnessed before. In that moment, the tension seemed to shift from hostility to something more uncertain, more human. Marcus Bennett, standing nearby, cleared his throat. "I think we can all agree that experiences like Mrs. Williams's highlight a bigger issue, how we decide who belongs in certain spaces. Maybe this exhibit is forcing us to confront that." One by one, people around them began sharing snippets of their own encounters with bias. A couple recounted a restaurant refusing to seat them, assuming they couldn't afford the menu. An elderly woman in a wheelchair described how upscale boutiques often ignored her. Their confessions mingled with the echoes of the exhibits, each story illuminating a collective theme. No one was truly immune to superficial judgment. Gregory Palmer's expression flickered with something akin to discomfort. He turned as if to leave, but Margaret stepped forward, her voice gentler than usual. "Mr. Palmer, surely you see that this isn't about tearing anyone down. It's about rethinking how we treat people, no matter what they wear or how they look." He looked at Margaret, then at the mosaic centerpiece. The golden shards near its heart reflected fragments of light, creating a warm glow that danced across the floor. For a brief moment, his eyes betrayed an internal conflict. Without a word, he turned on his heel and moved away, disappearing into the crowd. Veronica lingered, swallowing hard as she took in Jennifer's mosaic. "You extended me an invitation, even after everything," she said quietly. "I don't know if I deserve it, but I'm grateful." If you hadn't, I'd still be clinging to pride I never earned. Jennifer's throat tightened. She felt a wave of empathy for this woman who had once dismissed her so callously. We all have second chances, she replied. The question is what we do with them. A collective sigh of relief seemed to pass through those gathered. The conversation shifted from confrontation to introspection. The exhibit hadn't even been open an hour, and already deeply personal truths were surfacing. As Jennifer stepped back to let the night continue, she felt an odd mixture of exhaustion and hope. Tonight wasn't just about unveiling art, it was about unveiling hearts. Word of the exhibit's emotional opening spread fast. Social media buzzed with snapshots of the mosaic reconciliation, accompanied by captions describing powerful moments of introspection and confession. Critics wrote early reviews, some hailing it as a haunting reflection of modern-day prejudice, others calling it brave but perhaps too sentimental. Regardless of the varied opinions, the gallery was soon thronged with visitors eager to see what all the fuss was about. Within days, Beyond Appearances became the talk of the city's art circles. The lines outside Whitman Gallery often spilled onto the sidewalk. Families, college students, tourists, and even a few celebrities posted on Instagram about the pieces that resonated most. Jennifer found herself unaccustomed to the sudden spotlight. She was grateful to Margaret for shouldering much of the press inquiries, but still, requests for interviews piled up. One afternoon, Jennifer guided a small group of high school art students through the gallery. She recognized the same spark in them that had once ignited her own artistic journey. Near the mosaic, a teenage girl raised her hand. "How did you decide what broken pieces to include?" she asked. "They look random, but it's beautiful altogether." Jennifer knelt, meeting the girl's curious eyes. Each shard was chosen for its unique color and shape. The idea is that our differences can converge to form something greater than the sum of its parts. Behind her, a staff member signaled that Elizabeth Chen, the editor-in-chief of Art Forum, had arrived for her scheduled interview. Jennifer excused herself, trying to tame the anxious flutter in her stomach as she approached. Elizabeth was a poised woman with sharp eyes behind red-framed glasses. After a quick greeting, they sat in a quiet corner of the gallery where light fell softly on one of Jennifer's abstract paintings. "I've read about your personal experiences that inspired this exhibit," Elizabeth began, setting a small recorder on the bench between them. "But tell me, did you anticipate the cultural impact it's having? The crowds, the debates?" Jennifer smiled ruefully. "I never imagined it on this scale. I was just trying to express my own hurt and hope. The fact that so many see themselves in the work, it's humbling." Elizabeth nodded. "What do you say to critics who believe you're capitalizing on a personal grievance with a store like Elysian?" Jennifer's voice remained calm. "I understand their skepticism, but this is bigger than one store or one incident. People judge based on appearances in countless ways. Elysian was a catalyst, but the underlying issue is universal." Elizabeth's lips curved into a thoughtful smile. "In your piece, Reflections, you use mirrors and paint to depict distorted self-images. Can you talk about how that ties into the overall message?" Jennifer glanced at the painting in question, shards of mirror embedded into thick strokes of color that seemed to swirl in chaotic patterns. We often see ourselves through others' distorted judgments, or even our own biases. We forget that we're so much more than a reflection in a mirror. Elizabeth asked a few more questions about technique and future projects, then clicked off her recorder. "Thank you, Jennifer. This will make a compelling feature. I'm rooting for you." By the time Elizabeth left, the gallery was bustling again. A middle-aged couple approached Jennifer, their eyes misty. They explained how the exhibit had stirred memories of being turned away from an exclusive country club in their youth. "We never spoke about it," the husband admitted quietly. But standing here, we realized we still carried that hurt. Jennifer offered a soft, empathetic look. Sometimes art brings out hidden wounds we didn't know we still had, she said gently. I hope this can be a step toward healing. The couple thanked her and moved on, leaving Jennifer to reflect on the countless stories she was hearing. Beyond Appearances had grown into a living tapestry of shared pain and revelation. While some critics scoffed at its emotional intensity, Jennifer saw how deeply it resonated with ordinary people. That night, as she locked up the gallery with Margaret, she felt a mixture of exhaustion and fulfillment. The echoes of personal confessions lingered in the air, as though each painting still whispered the stories people had unburdened. She realized that the success of her exhibit lay not just in aesthetics, but in the honest connections it fostered, and that, more than any fame, was the reward she cherished most. Despite the exhibit's growing acclaim, Jennifer couldn't shake the lingering shadows that hovered at the fringes of her new success. One afternoon, a biting critique appeared in the New York Observer, penned by William Reynolds, a conservative culture writer who dismissed Beyond Appearances as self-indulgent moral grandstanding. He questioned whether Jennifer's personal story was truly emblematic of societal ills, or merely a dramatization of petty conflicts. The critique stung more than Jennifer wanted to admit. She tried to brush it off, reminding herself that not everyone would connect with her message. Still, the words burrowed into her thoughts. Later that same day, during a casual conversation with David at her apartment, she let the hurt show. I know you can't please everyone, she said, hands wrapped around a mug of green tea, but part of me worries. What if he's right? What if I'm making too big a deal out of one humiliating incident? David sat beside her on the worn couch, resting a comforting hand on her knee. Then all the people who told you how your art touched them are wrong, he asked gently. That can't be true. There's always going to be someone who criticizes or questions your motives, especially when you challenge the status quo. She exhaled a long breath. You're right. I just need to keep perspective. Adding to her unease was the subtle shift at her school, where she continued teaching art part-time. A few colleagues seemed distant, almost wary of her. Diana Morgan, the principal, pulled her aside one morning to warn her of potential new guidelines for teacher conduct outside of work, an apparent concern that Jennifer's activism might reflect back on the school. Though nothing was official yet, the implications stung. And then there was her relationship with David itself, which had entered unfamiliar territory. While he remained unwaveringly supportive, Horizon Technologies was feeling the ripple effects from Jennifer's newfound spotlight. Some business acquaintances avoided David, worried they'd be roped into controversies. Investors had whispered concerns about negative PR. He never blamed Jennifer, but she could see the tension etched into his features after long days at the office. Sensing her unease, Elaine Chen invited Jennifer for a walk through Prospect Park. The leaves had turned golden, creating a picturesque autumnal setting that usually uplifted Jennifer's spirits. But even the crisp air and the crunch of fallen leaves underfoot couldn't fully quell her worries. Elaine looped an arm through Jennifer's. I read that Observer article, she said. The guy sounded cranky and stuck in his ways. Don't let him get under your skin. Jennifer pressed her lips together. I know, but I hate feeling like I'm causing trouble for David. We don't talk about it much, but it's there. They strolled in comfortable silence until Elaine spoke again. Remember, you're in this together. He's a grown man who decides where he stands. If he's chosen to support you, then trust him to do that. Another persistent shadow lurked in her mind, Gregory Palmer's potential maneuvers. Though he had disappeared from the exhibit's opening, Jennifer had heard rumors that he continued to pressure certain philanthropists and even some of Margaret's longtime supporters to distance themselves from the gallery. The fear of losing crucial funding or seeing the exhibit forcibly truncated haunted her. At the gallery, Margaret remained a rock of unwavering support. "Let Gregory try," she would say, with a fiery conviction. "We have enough independent patrons and the raw public enthusiasm to stay afloat." Yet, late at night after closing, Jennifer occasionally caught the older woman gazing at the final attendance figures or corporate sponsor emails with a worried furrow in her brow. The threat was real, even if Margaret refused to let it show publicly. All these concerns weighed heavily on Jennifer as she left the gallery one evening. The city lights glittered against a dark sky, but in her heart she sensed an unshakable gloom. Yes, the exhibit was a triumph on many levels, yet the personal and professional toll felt significant. Still, she remembered how her mother, Catherine Williams, once told her that real change often looks messy before it becomes meaningful. Clutching her coat tighter, Jennifer walked toward the subway, determined not to let the shadows pull her under. The mosaic of her life was expanding, each new piece adding depth, even the painful ones. And deep down, she believed that the best transformations often come from enduring the hardest trials. Jennifer stood at the entrance of the New York Botanical Garden on a rare day off, seeking a tranquil place to think. She and David had planned a casual outing, hoping to catch a break from the swirl of public attention. The lush garden paths offered a soothing contrast to Manhattan's frenetic pace. As they meandered beneath towering oaks and delicately pruned cherry trees, David squeezed her hand. "Margaret told me you got another big offer from a corporate sponsor," he said, referring to an international luxury brand wanting to feature her art in a promotional campaign. "Are you leaning one way or another?" Jennifer sighed. "I'm not sure. On one hand, the money could fund scholarships for young artists or help expand art programs in schools, but on the other hand, it might compromise the integrity of my message if it's turned into a glossy marketing pitch." David nodded thoughtfully. "It's a tough call, but from what I know of you, you've never let money dictate your decisions." She gave him a soft smile. "That's true. Still, I don't want to let an opportunity slip by if it could really do good." They paused at a small pond where bright orange koi fish glided just beneath the surface. "I feel this responsibility, like I have to stay true to the exhibit's spirit, but also find ways to make a lasting impact." They strolled on, passing a cluster of visitors snapping photos of orchids in bloom. Eventually, the conversation shifted to their relationship. David mentioned a worry that had weighed on him. "With all this attention, I sometimes feel overshadowed," he admitted, the hint of a smile taking the sting out of his words. "I used to be the center of a conversation. Now everyone's talking about you and your exhibit." Jennifer stopped in her tracks, turning to face him. "I never wanted that. Your support has been everything to me. If it's too much..." He silenced her with a gentle kiss to her forehead. "It's not too much. Just new." His eyes shone with affection. "I'm proud of you, Jen, and proud to stand beside you." Later that evening, Jennifer had a final meeting with Margaret and Sophia at the gallery offices. They discussed the exhibit's upcoming closure and the question of whether it should move on to other cities. Margaret eyed Jennifer over her stylish reading glasses. "We've had inquiries from galleries in Chicago and San Francisco. If you want to tour, it could expand your message." Jennifer fiddled with the edge of a marketing flyer. "I'd love to share beyond appearances with more people, but I'm also worried about overextending myself. I still teach, and I don't want to abandon my students. Plus, I'm starting to miss the quieter life I had." Sophia nodded with empathy. "That's what you have to weigh, right? How far do you want this story to spread? And how much do you need to preserve your normalcy? Margaret placed a hand gently on Jennifer's shoulder. We'll respect whatever you decide. The important thing is that your art has made an impact. No one can take that away. On her way home, Jennifer's thoughts simmered with possibilities. Could she refine the exhibit, focus on traveling it around under the Whitman name, or should she keep it local? Should she accept the corporate sponsorship if it came with conditions? And what about the students who depended on her unique perspective at school? As she entered the apartment, she glanced around at the scattered sketches and leftover boxes of pamphlets. The Elysian fiasco felt like a lifetime ago, yet it had only been months. She'd come so far, both in her art and in her willingness to stand publicly for her beliefs. But with every step into the future, she risked drifting away from the small comforts and personal connections that had once defined her life. Flipping open her phone, she saw an email from a community arts foundation asking if she'd lead a nationwide program helping marginalized youth find a voice through art. Her heart fluttered with excitement mixed with fear. If she said yes, her life would change even more drastically. Jennifer closed her eyes and pictured her mosaic reconciliation with its jagged fragments fused into beauty. That was her life now, a tapestry of broken and brilliant pieces. She would have to choose which path to follow, knowing she couldn't please everyone. In the quiet of her living room, she realized that the most authentic choice would be the one that let her remain true to the core values shaping every brushstroke she'd ever painted. Jennifer stood in front of her classroom's paint-splattered tables, momentarily mesmerized by how familiar it all felt. The vibrant swirl of the Bronx kids' art projects contrasted with the sophistication of the Whitman Gallery, where her exhibit had just concluded. In the weeks since Beyond Appearances closed its run in New York, Jennifer discovered she now occupied a changed space, one where she was still very much the dedicated art teacher, but also a public figure with a reputation for sparking social dialogue. She greeted her students with the same bright smile they were used to, yet noticed their widened eyes and excited whispers. Some of them had caught glimpses of her name on social media. Others clung to stories about how she'd bravely stood up to a famous boutique. The shift in their attitude felt tangible, more respect, deeper curiosity. Perhaps they sensed that her once quiet dedication to art had blossomed into something bigger than the classroom alone. At the end of the day, Diana Morgan, the school principal, asked Jennifer to step into her office. The space was small and modest, filled with stacks of paperwork on battered wooden shelves. Diana, a petite woman with commanding presence, gave Jennifer a thoughtful look. "I've seen the coverage on your exhibit," she began, fiddling with a silver pen. "Your name has become a beacon for kids who don't usually get recognized." Jennifer nodded carefully, unsure of Diana's tone. Was she about to be admonished for the school being linked with her activism, or praised for it? Diana's expression softened. "I want to expand our after-school art program, especially for the older students who feel neglected by mainstream curricula. Your approach, well, it resonates with them. Would you consider taking on a larger role here?" The offer sent a spark of warmth through Jennifer. Despite the potential demands, her heart leaped at the idea of reaching more students. "I'd love to," she said, voice brimming with sincerity. Art changes lives, especially for kids who rarely see themselves celebrated. That evening, she returned to her Brooklyn apartment to find David cooking a simple pasta dinner, a gentle jazz tune playing in the background. He greeted her with a hug that seemed to wash away any lingering tension from the day. Over bowls of steaming spaghetti, Jennifer recounted the principal's proposal, her excitement evident. David listened with an encouraging smile that lit up his blue eyes. "I think it's perfect," he said. "You're returning to where your passion began, but with new perspective. That's how real change starts, one community at a time. Jennifer glanced at her half-finished sketches scattered across the coffee table, pieces inspired by the final days of the exhibit. She'd intended to pause her artistic pursuits after the gallery run, hoping to catch her breath from all the attention. Yet every time she glimpsed those sketches, an itch to keep painting stirred in her. It was as though her experience had unlocked a new level of creativity she couldn't contain. In a private moment before bed, her phone buzzed with a message from Marcus Bennett. "Heard about your next steps at the school. Fantastic news. Also, we're drafting a charter for that pro bono network. Let's talk soon." A smile curved across Jennifer's face. The web of people who had rallied around her cause was still there, still expanding. Allies like Marcus provided her with reassurance that standing up for one's beliefs could inspire structural change, even if it began in small increments. Just before sleep claimed her, she reflected on how different everything felt from those early days when she could slip quietly out of class with her paint-stained jeans, and no one the wiser. Now, she was known as the teacher who'd turned a humiliating encounter into a citywide conversation. Her life was no longer just about her easel and her students. It involved boardrooms, lawyers, journalists, and philanthropic circles. But as she closed her eyes, she felt a calm resolve. The students' smiling faces returned to her mind, reminding her that at her core, she was still the same woman who believed in art's power to uncover hidden beauty and hidden truths. In the morning, Jennifer packed her lesson materials with renewed purpose, stepping out into a brisk, sunlit street. The city felt less daunting and more like a partner in her journey. She recognized she'd never fully go back to the quiet, unassuming life she once led. Yet she also sensed a deep peace in embracing the role she'd grown into, a teacher, artist, and advocate for seeing people beyond the surface. It wasn't a relinquishing of who she was, but a fuller return to the essence of everything she believed. In the weeks that followed, Jennifer noticed how the ripples of her exhibit continued to shape her daily life. A simple trip to the neighborhood grocery store often ended in conversations with strangers who recognized her from local news pieces or word-of-mouth buzz. Some wanted to share stories of their own experiences with judgment. Others merely offered supportive nods. While grateful, she sometimes craved the anonymity she once took for granted. She strolled down a Brooklyn street one Saturday morning, arms full of fresh produce, when she noticed a familiar face. Veronica Hartwell. Gone was the intimidating manager's aura she wore at Elysian. Instead, Veronica held a paper bag of groceries, hair pinned back simply. They locked eyes, an awkward hesitation floating in the air. "Jennifer," Veronica said, cautious yet warmer than before. "Hi." "Hi," Jennifer replied softly. Her mind flashed to that day in the gallery when Veronica openly admitted her wrongdoing. Since then, they'd only exchanged sporadic messages about the aftermath of Elysian's management upheaval. "How are you?" Veronica exhaled. "I'm, in a rebuilding phase," she answered, a faint smile breaking through. "I'm volunteering at a local art community center, trying to help kids from low-income families explore creativity. Inspired by you, actually." A wave of surprise and gratitude washed over Jennifer. "That's wonderful to hear," she said. "I think you'll find the kids are as much teachers as they are students." Veronica nodded, then cleared her throat. "I've also apologized to some of the former staff at Elysian, the ones who felt pressured by me. It's a process, but I'm trying to—" Her voice quivered slightly. "Trying to move forward without shame, defining me." Touched, Jennifer reached out and gently squeezed Veronica's arm. "It sounds like you're on a good path. We all deserve a chance to learn from our mistakes." They parted ways with a tentative mutual respect. As Jennifer continued home, she realized how deeply the threads of their stories had become intertwined. The humiliation at Elysian had set off a chain reaction, leading not just to Jennifer's personal growth, but also to Veronica's search for redemption. That afternoon, an email from a journalist popped into Jennifer's inbox. The reporter, Jonathan Wells from NY Elite, requested a follow-up interview for a feature titled "Women Transforming the Face of Art in New York." Jennifer recalled that Jonathan had once approached her in a more sensationalist manner. This time, his tone was genuinely curious, promising a thoughtful piece on the social impact of her work. Debating whether to accept, she thought about the potential for further scrutiny. She finally reasoned that if the interview brought attention to the very values she championed, empathy, inclusivity, second chances, then it might be worth the risk. So she wrote back a measured yes. Later, in her studio, she picked up the partially finished painting from the exhibit's leftover concepts, a swirling mixture of soft pastels and dark streaks, representing the internal battles people faced when judged by appearances. Adding brushstrokes of white to symbolize hope, Jennifer let her mind wander to those she had encountered: Veronica, Marcus, Elaine, David, her students. Each cameo in her life reminded her of how complicated and beautiful human stories could be, each reflecting the other's joys and pains. Her phone pinged with a text from David: "Missing you. Are you free for dinner?" A smile tugged at her lips. Despite the intensity of public attention and David's own professional stresses, they carved out time for each other. That evening, over a quiet meal in a small Italian eatery, they exchanged updates. David mentioned a philanthropic technology initiative at Horizon that would sponsor tablet-based art programs in underserved schools. "Maybe your students can be part of the pilot," he suggested excitedly. She felt a swell of admiration. "We should definitely talk to Principal Morgan about that," she replied, eyes shining. Even as challenges persisted, moments like this anchored her. A partnership built on mutual respect and a shared desire to better the world affirmed she was not alone in her quest. Walking home under a canopy of soft city lights, Jennifer pondered the echoes of her recent past. Each conversation, each new or renewed relationship served as a mirror reflecting just how far she'd come. Where once she felt isolated in her determination to be authentic, she now sensed a growing community that embraced the same ideals. She unlocked her apartment door, noticing the scattering of art supplies across the living room floor. Thoughts of future projects stirred in her mind. While the official run of Beyond Appearances in New York was over, the exhibit spirit continued thriving in the countless reflections and revelations it sparked. And Jennifer, standing in the gentle hush of her home, realized she had no desire for the echoes to quiet, because through them, lives, including her own, were transforming in unforeseen ways. 2 months after the gallery show, Jennifer was busier than ever. Her part-time teaching job expanded into an after-school arts outreach program, a direct response to the enthusiasm that had surged after her public journey. She'd also begun collaborating with a small collective of artists who sought to use their work to challenge biases and spark conversations in marginalized neighborhoods. One chilly afternoon, Jennifer found herself in a drafty community center auditorium, preparing for a workshop she'd volunteered to lead. Large sheets of paper hung along the walls, ready for participants to express their stories through art. The place bustled with teenagers curious about painting, collage, or even digital media. The hum of youthful energy lifted Jennifer's spirits, reminding her why she'd embraced this calling in the first place. Marcus Bennett arrived, greeting Jennifer with a warm handshake. "We did it," he announced, handing her a neatly bound document. "This is the charter for our pro bono initiative protecting creatives from legal intimidation." We're calling it Visionary Voices Defense, a network of lawyers who'll stand up for people like you, free of charge. A grin spread across Jennifer's face. She remembered how Elysian's threat of a lawsuit had once loomed over her, nearly squashing her resolve. "This is amazing," she said, flipping through the pages. The formal language outlined the scope of legal aid, from cease and desist defenses to broader representation. "Marcus, you're changing lives." He shrugged in good humor. "I'm just using my skills to even the playing field. Your story showed us how easily big entities can shut down individual voices." While they set up the workshop tables, the center's director, a middle-aged woman with a kind smile, introduced them to a few local activists. One was an older gentleman in a wheelchair who had been turned away from various stores due to accessibility issues. Another was a soft-spoken single mother who had been judged for her worn-out clothes when applying for jobs. Their stories mirrored the exhibit's central theme. Behind every face was a rich complexity that mainstream culture often overlooked. That evening, Margaret Whitman called Jennifer to share good news. "We're officially extending beyond appearances to Chicago," she said, voice practically humming through the phone. "The Fieldstone Gallery there wants to host a condensed version of your exhibit. It'd run for 2 months, possibly longer." A swirl of excitement mixed with apprehension took hold of Jennifer. "That's an incredible opportunity," she replied. "But I'm torn. My role at the school is bigger now, and I have these community projects. I'm not sure how much I can travel." Margaret's tone remained reassuring. "We can work out the details. You might only need to be there for the setup and opening. Think it over, dear. We'll support whatever you decide." Lying in bed later, Jennifer reflected on the interlocking circles of influence she was now part of. The exhibit's success continued weaving her into a broader network: artists, lawyers, educators, philanthropists, and everyday people touched by her message. Each connection seemed to sprout fresh possibilities, like an ever-growing web where each node strengthened the others. Meanwhile, David was deep in planning a philanthropic initiative that merged Horizon Technologies with grassroots art programs. He and Jennifer had held brainstorming dinners, swirling ideas about how to best equip underfunded schools with technology to enhance creativity. Their synergy felt like a natural extension of their bond, one that propelled them to dream bigger for communities that needed resources and hope. Still, amid all this synergy, Jennifer sometimes worried about losing the quieter parts of life that once nourished her. She missed the long, uninterrupted hours spent painting alone, letting the hush of her studio speak to her. The busy swirl of phone calls and emails left little time for open-ended creativity. But she also recognized that the changes in her life were mostly blessings, platforms to uplift voices like Tyler's, or the many kids who needed a champion. As she drifted to sleep that night, Jennifer pictured the mosaic from her exhibit. In her imagination, the shards stretched outward, connecting with other mosaics in a grand communal tapestry. She could almost see each person she'd met, a piece of glass shining with its own color, each reflection hitting another. In the midst of this dazzling interplay, she realized that every circle of influence she entered made her stronger, not smaller. The circle kept growing, and so did she. A year after that fateful day at Elysian, Jennifer found herself once again standing outside Riverside, the intimate restaurant with the stunning view of the Hudson. Tonight was a special occasion. She and David were celebrating their 1-year anniversary since they'd confessed their feelings and begun dating in earnest. In that span of time, their relationship had weathered trials neither could have predicted, forging a deeper bond. The maître d' greeted them warmly and led them to a table near the floor-to-ceiling windows. The glowing city lights flickered across the water's surface, reminiscent of a painting Jennifer might have created. She recalled the first time they dined here, how she nervously confided in David about her humiliating experience at Elysian, not knowing it would spark a citywide conversation on judging by appearances. They ordered simple meals, David opting for a grilled salmon, and Jennifer for a lightly spiced vegetable risotto. When the plates arrived, Emma Sullivan, the chef owner, poked her head out of the kitchen to offer a quick hello. "I'm so proud of you two," she said with a knowing smile, before disappearing back into the bustle of the kitchen. Jennifer couldn't help but marvel at how much had changed. Her once hidden artistic expressions had become public catalysts for empathy. She'd created an after-school program that was thriving, contributed pieces to a traveling exhibit, and aided in forming a legal network to protect artists from intimidation. Meanwhile, David's philanthropic efforts at Horizon had gained traction, funneling technology and funding toward art-based community projects. Both of them had grown as individuals, yet their paths converged beautifully. Between bites of risotto, David reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a small, elegantly wrapped box. He slid it across the table. "Before dessert, I have a gift," he said quietly, eyes sparkling with affection. Curiosity gripped Jennifer as she carefully undid the ribbon. Inside was a rectangular frame enclosing a tie. A midnight blue silk tie with subtle golden threads woven in geometric shapes. She recognized it instantly, the very tie she'd tried to purchase the day Elysian had dismissed her. Tears pricked her eyes. "How?" David shrugged, a tender grin on his face. "I managed to acquire it privately. I wanted to keep it for a moment like this." He nodded at the tie, now carefully mounted behind glass. "It's a reminder of where we started, how one humiliating moment changed everything." Jennifer's vision blurred with tears of gratitude and memory. The tie, once a symbol of an unattainable purchase, was now an artifact representing both the pain and the triumph that followed. "It's perfect," she whispered, her voice catching. They sat in comfortable silence, letting the weight of that memory settle. Outside, the Hudson's dark waters reflected the city lights in a shimmering dance, as if nature itself were applauding how far they'd come. Jennifer touched the glass surface over the tie and felt a rush of conflicting emotions, sadness for the ordeal she'd endured, and profound joy for the compassion and creative purpose it had unleashed. After dinner, David asked for the check, but Emma appeared with 2 glasses of champagne on the house. She winked. "For the couple who reminds us all to see deeper than we're used to." They clinked glasses, savoring the crisp bubbles. Thoughts fluttered through Jennifer's mind about her students, Veronica's volunteer work, the mosaic that traveled to Chicago, and the countless stories she'd heard since that day at Elysian. In each instance, she recognized an undeniable thread. Real change emerged when people risked vulnerability, stepped beyond prejudices, and embraced empathy. When they finally left the restaurant, a cool breeze brushed against Jennifer's cheeks. David took her hand, and they walked along the riverside, the tie in its frame tucked safely under his arm. Neither spoke, content to let the moment's significance settle. At one point, Jennifer stopped to take in the city skyline. She recalled the mosaic of broken shards, how each fragment caught the light differently. In that mosaic, she saw a reflection of her journey, small pieces of pain and prejudice fused into a larger narrative of healing and connection. The luxury store fiasco no longer defined her, but it had catalyzed a remarkable sequence of events that touched countless lives. Beyond appearances, she found art, love, and community all woven together, proving that beauty most often arises from honest vulnerability. Turning back to David, she offered a radiant smile. With her free hand, she brushed the tears from her eyes. "Ready to go home?" he asked gently. She nodded. Home, where paint-stained jeans and unfinished canvases coexisted with a new sense of purpose. Home, where tomorrow she would teach children to see the vibrant colors hidden in the world. And home, where she and David would continue forging their shared vision, a vision that looked past the surface and found hope, compassion, and love in every person they encountered. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.